That's Stacey Blackwood. I'm Clint Lamb, and you're listening to Strength and Conditioning on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Stacey, we just decided to go live. We were about to record a video. It had nothing to do with this. And then this news breaks, and it's like, you know what? Let's pivot. Let's talk about what people are actually going to want to talk about, which is the report from Matt Hayes that is claiming that when Carson Beck decided to make the decision to not go to the NFL and come back and enter the transfer portal, that the claim is that Georgia was the first school to contact him and make him an NIL offer. And then it said that Alabama was the second. I'll go ahead and let you kind of start us off here. What do you think about those reports? Do you think they're true? Do you think they're accurate? Or do you think, this is stirring up some off-season controversy?
It's probably, I think it's grounded in some truth. Now, the depth of what it means to reach out to someone and what Alabama's actual interest in Carson Beck is obviously the biggest question. But I guess it wouldn't shock me that they might reach out to Carson Beck. They do only have 3 scholarship quarterbacks going into 2025, and none of them really have any experience, in big time moments. Carson Beck certainly has that. But on the other hand, it is a little surprising in the fact that all we've heard, from people that know is that the coaching staff really likes where they're at with Tai Simpson, with Kalen Russell, with Austin Mack. So to bring in a guy like Carson Beck, you like you mentioned, you're probably going to have to give him a good bit of money in NIL. And just it feels like that would not be the best thing for the locker room. So the actual interest from Alabama, I'm not sure how much that was, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm a little surprised, but not just completely shocked.
I respect taking that approach. I'm not going to. I'm going to flat out say that it's false. I don't believe it. And it doesn't make sense to me for a number of reasons. Number one, Carson Beck got $4 million from Miami, right?
Yeah.
Alabama maybe contacted him and didn't offer him that much, but they had to come in close. Where's that money coming from? I'm not saying Alabama's broke by any means. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's like this entire time, not knowing Carson Beck was going to remove his name from the transfer portal, you had that kind of money available and you're not looking to spend that elsewhere to help out the roster. That would be interesting to me. Next, Kalen Russell is going to be given an opportunity to win the starting job. He's a true freshman. I've said I don't necessarily think he's going to be ready. It's very tough for freshmen to get ready, especially right out the gate. But if you actually were legitimately going to give him a shot to win the starting job, bringing in Carson Beck and paying him millions of dollars completely cancels that out. You're not paying Carson Beck to be another camp arm. You're not paying him to be your backup quarterback. You would be paying him to come in and start. So right then and there, any promises that you've made, not to Kalen Russell that you're going to be our starter, but you will have the opportunity to start, that immediately goes out the window. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Tai Simpson, who is a guy that you have convinced to stick around for forever. He's been, seriously, it has been way longer than your average former 5-star quarterback as far as the commitment level that he's given to Alabama. He deserves the opportunity to compete for a starting job. He doesn't deserve the opportunity to automatically be the starter because he stuck around, but he deserves the opportunity to compete for the starting job. So you would completely take that out. It's the same thing as it would be with Kalen Russell, where if you sign Carson Beck, you're not giving Tai Simpson that opportunity. And granted, if that was in fact true, I think that would speak volumes as far as how the coaching staff felt about Tai Simpson. From everything that I've heard, they don't feel that way about him. Like they don't view him negatively. They like how he's developed. They like his potential in the offense. And if you could get an even trade out perfectly with Carson Beck, it is possible that they would make that trade because Beck was the more proven commodity. But it's not worth everything that you're doing as far as the rest of your roster and how you're trying to, go about it. And plus, you've got the elbow injury. Like, how long is he going to be out for? Just none of this makes sense to me, Stacey.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up something at the beginning that I didn't really think about. the NIL situation, there are much more glaring needs on this team than going and spending $4 million on a quarterback when you have 3 guys that the coaching staff is confident in. You have issues at tackle, offensive tackle. I think fans would love to see a dominant defensive lineman, and obviously that comes down to who's available in the portal. But if that money, like you said, was available for Alabama to spend, I'm with you. They're not spending that on a quarterback. They have other needs on that roster outside of quarterback to spend that type of money on. So that's a great point to make there. I'm in the camp that it would also send the wrong message to the team, to the quarterback room, to a guy like Tai Simpson, who's going to be entering his redshirt junior season. So he's waited his turn under multiple coaching staffs, and like you said, he's a guy that's doing something that most kids don't do. And you're just sending the message to the rest of the roster is like, hey, you can wait your turn, but if we think we could get somebody better, I'm sorry. And I just feel like that's the wrong message to send to a guy like Tai Simpson, who the coaching staff has bragged about all year long, even as a backup to Jalen Milroe. So for that standpoint, I'm with you. I think it's false. I think I don't want to say clickbait because that's an easy thing to go to. Maybe he got bad information. Matt Hayes did.
He did.
I don't know. Yeah, I think he's received bad information. I don't see where it would benefit Alabama to reach out to Carson Beck, not only from where you stand at the quarterback position, the kind of message it would send to your team. The NIL situation doesn't add up from a dollar standpoint. Like you said, not because Alabama was broke, but because they have needs elsewhere that could have been met with that type of money. So it just doesn't make any sense with all those factors laid out in front of us. And the chat is kind of saying the same thing. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Well, I do think Matt got bad information, and not saying, it's someone close to Carson Beck. I'm pretty sure, I'm like 90% sure that that's mentioned in the article. Someone that wanted to remain anonymous because of how close they are to the situation. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's always interesting. Now, granted, that's not new or different, but just find how that was worded. And maybe I'm getting the wording a little bit wrong, but that stood out to me. Secondly, I don't think Georgia reached out to him either. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that front, but they just, all the reports and stuff were that they were ready to move on.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It feels like to me that Miami got a great deal here. I mean, they spent $4 million on a quarterback that his previous team was kind of ready to move on. It sounds a lot better when you say not only was that team not ready to move on, they tried to reach out and immediately offered him an NIL deal. And what has been known as the first or second best program alongside Georgia and Alabama, they also were the second team to reach out. And that makes sense if you're trying to kind of steer this narrative, because if you don't really know Alabama's quarterback situation, all you know is that their 2-year starter, Jalen Milroe, just moved on or is moving on to the NFL. And, Carson Beck, from a fit standpoint, winning from in the pocket, having a little bit of mobility. He didn't have a lot of weapons there in Athens. He would have Ryan Williams. He would have Jeremy Bernard. He would have Isaiah Horton. So he would have a lot more pieces around him to work with. It would make sense to kind of pitch that narrative and it be plausible. When you really start looking at it, it doesn't really add up in any extent because, like I said, Keelan Russell was not guaranteed the starting job coming in. He was not, but he was told he would get to compete for a starting job. Tai Simpson, he was not promised the starting job just because Jalen Milroe's now moved on, but he has waited his turn and people feel like he deserves the opportunity to compete for a starting job. You are slapping both of those two guys in the face, and you are sending a very public message by doing that. And granted, some people are pointing out you might have just reached out. You might have not offered anything. You maybe just were wanting to kind of get some feelers. I just don't think that's what they're trying to do here. I really don't, because even when you're Alabama, what was the big thing, with Ryan Grubb and all these other, Jeff Lebby, it was like, it was a big deal when they rejected Alabama and decided to stay where they were at. Like, if you're going to pull these types of moves, agents, players, people close to the situation, they're going to leak that stuff. And I just don't think it's good looking. I mean, how feasible he entered the transfer portal with a do not contact label. And first of all, I don't even know how that works. Like, you're told not to be contacted, but you're saying Georgia and Alabama contacted them, so they just ignored that. Maybe it's just you signaling to everybody, hey, I've got my decision already made. Maybe some programs ignore that, but isn't that interesting how you had a do not contact? And it's like, okay, that decision's been made, but yeah, Bama and Georgia, the two top programs in college football. Maybe you can make an argument for like an Ohio State, but I don't think many would as far as recent success. Just because they're playing in the national title doesn't mean much. But I mean, you're saying that they were over here fighting over Carson Beck and he just so happened to pick Miami?
Right. Yeah. And the Miami thing was such an obvious choice to begin with. And I do want to be clear about something. Alabama's lack of interest, in our opinion, to me, has nothing to do with Carson Beck's ability to play football. I think he's a good quarterback. And I think in different circumstances and different top situations in terms of the roster and the depth chart at quarterback, maybe Alabama would have had interest. But this does not seem like the right offseason for that to happen. So maybe even last offseason, it could have been the case. If Carson Beck would have entered the portal, Alabama might have had interest in him then. But it's not the right time. There's other positions of need that this staff would have reached out to for that type of NIL package, knowing Miami's looking for a replacement for Cam Ward, knowing the girlfriend situation down there as well, and him entering the portal with a no contact. It's just it's not adding up in terms of what this report is trying to suggest. And Alabama, I don't want to say they don't need Carson Beck, because I'm not trying to throw shade at Carson Beck. I think he's obviously a really talented player. He's been a good quarterback for Georgia. You mentioned he lacked weapons this season in that Georgia offense. I think they had the most drops in college football this season. In terms of their pass catchers, I think it was like 36 or plus or something like that, an outrageous number. So I think Carson Beck's a good player. But it was not this does not seem like the right time for Alabama to be dipping their toe into the transfer portal for a quarterback when they have a guy who's waited his turn in Tai Simpson and also brought in a guy. And don't forget Austin Mack either. I'm sure Austin Mack followed Coach DeBoer last offseason with kind of the thought, hey, after Milroe's gone next year, I'm going to have an opportunity to compete for the starting quarterback job at Alabama. And then they also bring in a guy like Kalen Russell, who's, one of the most talented high school quarterbacks I've seen in a very long time, who's certainly going to be given every opportunity to compete for that starting job as well. So bringing in Beck and even gauging for interest in Beck does not seem like a very smart move from the Alabama coaching staff, if that's what they did, and I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, and once again, I'm not trying to knock Matt Hayes, because I don't think this is from his end. I think it's somebody that's close to Beck that just thought, hey, this would look really good. And it could be from Miami's side too. Like, I don't fully know. I mean, it could be somebody like, hey, we can make ourselves look a lot smarter to the public by saying, hey, we outdid Alabama and Georgia, stealing Carson Beck. And it's just, and they paid him a lot of money. A lot of people thought that they might have overpaid him a little bit based off of like who was really competing with them for money on the money front. And so maybe this is their way to counter that and say, hey, we actually got a bargain because we had two of the top programs coming after this cat too. I don't know what the angle is, but I just know that Alabama's quarterback situation, in my opinion, is in a really good place right now. We won't know for sure. If it does come to light that this was in fact true, then when I first saw this report on Twitter, my immediate thought is, ooh, that's not a good look for Tai Simpson. Kalen Russell, you have no idea what you've got in him yet. Austin Mack, I think it would also be kind of a slight towards him to an extent, but he was kind of a young guy who was expecting to need even, a couple of more seasons of development. But, with Tai Simpson, I was like, this kind of, and then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And that's why I wanted to, kind of pivot from what we were going to be doing, which we will be doing next week. It was a great topic. You came up with it. Definitely want to talk about it, but just the quarterback situation in Tuscaloosa, I think is fine. It's the perfect situation. I've told people, if you really want 4 camp arms, you're kind of in a difficult place because, it would be another Gardner Minshew type of situation. Right. When Alabama had Jalen and Tua competing for the starting job back in 2018. And they needed another quarterback, a quarterback who, hey, if you had to go to him, it would be somebody that had some experience that you could maybe trust, have another arm. But who's going to come and be automatically the number 3? Like, you knew you weren't competing with Tua or Jalen. So it's like, in Gardner Minshew, he was originally going to do that because he thought he was going to be a coach. And so he's like, this is kind of the perfect opportunity for me to go to Tuscaloosa, learn from Nick Saban, maybe win a national title, get myself a ring. And then, we all know Mike Leach went to him and said, hey, do you want to lead the nation in passing yards? And he said, hey, that'd be pretty nice. I'll go to Washington State then. Ended up coming to fruition. That promise was fulfilled. He ends up going to the NFL and has been a pretty decent starter. Yeah. But, no one knew he was going to turn into that Gardner Minshew, though. When he committed to Alabama, it's like, okay, East Carolina, he's got that experience factor. He's another arm. Nobody you're going to write home about, but this is kind of what you're looking for. If Alabama was going to add a quarterback prior to the spring, that would be the type of player they would go after. And
I don't know of any available.
No, exactly. Because a lot of guys who are in the portal nowadays, they're in there with the sole purpose of, I want to play or I want to get paid. And if you're paying a guy to be your quarterback 4, you're not paying him a lot. So maybe you would be willing. I'm not saying they can't find somebody like that. I'm just going to tell you it's not Carson Beck. And so it just nothing on that front added up to me. Let's start to wind this down a little bit. You got anything else to add about the quarter? It could be about the quarterbacks. It could be about Beck. Or if you got something else that you want to talk about, we can talk about that too.
No, I want to just remind fans, as far as Austin Mack goes, he has the same situation as what Ryan Williams did. He enrolled an entire year early at Washington, so he's still even though he's going to be a redshirt sophomore, he's kind of a redshirt freshman going in this season because of his age. So he is still a very young player, and even if Kalen Russell comes in, I think Kalen Russell is going to be QB2 at worst. Don't think negatively of Austin Mack because he finishes behind, Tai Simpson and Kalen Russell maybe this offseason or going into next year, because he's still a relatively young player, got a lot of upside. Don't know how long he sticks around. Maybe, who knows? He may do a pull of Tai Simpson. You never know. But I think the coaching staff really likes what they have in Ty, Kalen, and Austin Mack. So I don't think there's a need for a 4th quarterback. Obviously, how many times do 3 quarterbacks get hurt in one season? It's very rare. So I don't think you need to worry about depth so much there. I think they feel confident in what they have with those 3 guys, and there's really no need in, watering down that room just for a number standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, I've kind of I've made mention that I do feel like Keelan's going to be the number 2 quarterback. That was in my depth chart projections that I did the way too early over at covercrimson.com. And,
great stuff, by the way. If people are watching this right now live, if you're not on covercrimson.com with the membership form, it is incredible stuff. Clint does something that I don't see anywhere else as far as Alabama sites are ran. The in-depth analysis that Clint gives, especially on the depth chart during the season when he's given the breakdown of snap count observations. There is nothing else on the internet you're going to find that with greater detail than what Clint does over at covercrimson.com. So make sure you sign up for that. It's affordable even in today's time. So make sure you're signed up at covercrimson.com because there's a lot of good content over there. We also throw in some recruiting stuff. We're obviously all over the transfer portal. We're looking at basketball with hoops going on right now as well. So there's plenty of content over there at covercrimson.com, and the detail and the knowledge that Clint drops over there is second to none. So make sure you are a part of the Cover Crimson community.
Thank you so much, man. I mean, that means the world to me. And we got a great thing going on. We love the subscribers. We love what they contribute. Love what you bring to the table as far as posting stuff over there. We do really try to provide everybody something a little bit different than you get anywhere else. That was my entire goal. When I started doing this, I thought, okay, when it comes to, the kind of beat writing stuff, I felt like there was really good beat writers covering Alabama in the industry. When it came to recruiting, I don't think you can find better recruiting guys than Alabama's got in this industry. But what I try to do is provide something else that people don't really have, that they're not getting at some of these other places. And so I really appreciate you saying that. And just with the quarterback situation, we'll finish with this. I do feel like that you need to be getting Kalen Russell the snaps. If you feel like he's your future, Tai Simpson, it is possible that he becomes the starter in 2025. He does just good enough to hang on to the starting job, but not good enough to move on to the NFL. He does have 2 years. Then you got to start worrying about Kalen Russell. Everybody talks about, okay, he'll transfer if he doesn't play. I don't buy that. If Tai Simpson's moving on for one reason or another after 2025, then I think if Kalen is in a position where he will be competing and really the likely favorite, the heavy favorite to win, why would he go compete somewhere else where he doesn't really know, doesn't have a feel? He would have such an advantage in Tuscaloosa at that point where I think he would give it another year. If Ty's coming back, then it becomes a problem. If he's the number 3 quarterback and it's Austin Mack getting all these mop-up duty reps and everything, I do think that could potentially be a problem. How would he view that? Maybe we could have that conversation then. I just think the smart thing to do right now, not knowing where he's at in his development, if he gets on campus in the spring and he's tearing it up, he's doing great things, it's like, hey, I'll be fully on board. If the coaching staff wants to go with him as a starter, I'm fine with that. But I just am not going to assume that that's going to happen, even though at some point I do think it is going to click for him and you're going to see that. But for now, it's more so Tai Simpson's your experienced guy. The coaching staff does like him. He has kind of waited his turn to have the opportunity to start, not to be handed the starting job. But if he ends up being your starter and Kalen loses out to him and Austin Mack does, I still think Kalen more than likely needs to be your number 2. Get him those reps in games and do what Alabama did back in 2017 with Tua. Bring him in at the end of games and let him get valuable game reps. Don't have him turning around, handing the football off 20 times to end the game because you're up by 35 points in the fourth quarter or late in the third quarter. Bring him in, let him run, an offense, a typical offense, let him sling it around a little bit, maybe let him run a little bit, and get him acclimated to playing college football. Do that as much as you possibly can. And then if something happens down the stretch and it's a Tua Jalen 2017 type of situation where maybe Ty's struggling, at that point you've prepared Kalen where he's in the best position to come in there and actually be able to handle it. Or if it's, you're just preparing him for 2026, I think that would give him the, obviously playing and going through those lumps and getting that out the way. Obviously him starting in 2025 would probably help him the most in 2026, but I think there's benefits of him sitting as well. But make sure at the very least you're getting him reps and all that stuff. So
I want to add to that just real quick. I think the perfect scenario for this coaching staff would be for it to work out similarly to what happened in 2020 with Mac Jones starting, Bryce Young as the backup, and Mac Jones just having a spectacular season, going on to become a first-round pick. Tai is certainly capable of doing the same thing. So if you could get one spectacular season here in 2025 from Tai Simpson, you move on to 2026 to Kalen Russell, and he's your starter for the next couple of seasons. I feel like that's the most, if you're trying to live in a perfect world, that would be a great way for it to work out for this coaching staff. And but either way, however it works out, I love all 3 quarterbacks in that room. And I think the coaching staff does. And I think they all have a lot of potential to be high quality starters in the SEC and in college football and do a lot of good things in this offense, especially with the weapons they have coming up in 2025 out wide and in the backfield as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just the whole thing, it makes a lot of sense with where they're at in their quarterback room. You've got the experienced guy who's been in the system for a while. You got the young phenom. You got the guy who's got the experience with Kalen DeBoer. I don't want to write Austin Mack off. I see people in the comments saying, I think Byron, DeBoer didn't bring Austin Mack across the country to sit him on the bench. Don't fool yourself. Look, I think he really wanted a quarterback going into a new place with a lot of pressure like Alabama. He wanted a quarterback where he knew what he was going to be getting with them, at least one. And it's like, okay, if all else fails, we like how this kid's developing. We can fall back on him if everything else starts to go haywire for whatever reason. It was a comfort thing. I mean, we saw it when he got to Washington. What did he do? He immediately went to try to get Jake Haener. He had experience with him from Fresno State. Haener committed to Washington. It didn't work out there because of some academic stuff. He couldn't get stuff to transfer. So he had to kind of renege on that a little bit, go back to Fresno. That left some egg on his face. But then next thing you know, Washington, Kalen DeBoer turns to another former quarterback that he had familiarity with, and Michael Penix Jr. from his time in Indiana. And, so he's like, hey, I want to bring him in, and the rest is history. And so I think Kalen DeBoer really, when he likes to get to a new spot, he wants to have a quarterback that he knows and is comfortable with. And it also benefits, the others as far as kind of sharing or, how DeBoer operates, how to, the ins and outs, like everything was being shared with, it flowing in one direction as far as the guys who are already on campus at Bama. How does it typically go? How does it typically look? But Austin Mack, what he brought to that quarterback room was, hey, this is how Kalen DeBoer operates. This is the things that you need to be looking out for. And so it was like a mutually beneficial relationship. Doesn't mean that that's the only reason he was brought in, because like I said, tons of promise. But just think that, he was brought in for the sole purpose of he's eventually going to be the starting quarterback and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If they felt that way and they felt like it was a pretty sure thing, then what's the point of going after Keelan Russell, right? I mean, because it's going to be either Austin Mack this year, or it's going to be Tai Simpson this year, or, next year it becomes Austin Mack. Like I just don't really see, I don't really see that being the case. But to say that Austin Mack's will not have a chance to start, I don't agree with that. He's going to be given opportunities as well. I just think that with Ty's experience in the system or Keelan's just pure overall talent, I think one of those two guys ends up prevailing. But we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening during the spring. Stacey, as always, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody in the comments section. We decided to go live. It was last second, but, we ended up having a pretty good crowd, and we appreciate all you guys. Stacey, we'll do this again soon, brother.
Sounds good.